Forced to marry a millionaire single dad. On wedding night, she discovered his hidden truth. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The rain was falling in heavy sheets over the small college town in Texas. Streetlights flickered against the wet pavement, casting reflections like broken mirrors across the sidewalks. Ella Carter walked quickly, clutching her worn leather bag to her chest. She was 22, juggling 2 part-time jobs and the last semester of her degree, and the weight of debt left behind by her late mother pressed on her shoulders like a stone. Her family's flower shop, the only thing left of her mother's legacy, was days away from being seized by the bank. Her thin coat did little against the cold. She pulled the hood up, but the wind still cut into her bones. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. With trembling hands, she answered. "Hello?" "Miss Carter." The voice on the other end was deep, controlled, and without hesitation. "This is Adrian Miles. I believe you know why I am calling." Her heart clenched. She had only heard his name whispered by her landlord and repeated by her aunt with fear. Adrian Miles was the wealthy single father who had offered what felt like an impossible deal. I am not sure," Ella stammered, but she knew exactly what he meant. "Your shop," Adrian said. "The debt. The collectors will not wait another week. I can end this, but you know my condition." Ella stopped under the awning of a shuttered bakery, the rain hammering the roof above her. She pressed her forehead to the cool glass. "Marriage," she whispered. "You want me to marry you." "It is not about romance," Adrian continued, his tone firm but not unkind. "It is a contract. You need stability. I need a wife on paper to secure custody of my son. I am offering you a way out, and in return you will help me protect my family. Think of it as an exchange of vows for survival, not love." Ella's throat tightened. "Why me? You do not even know me." "Oh, because you are unattached," he replied simply. "And because you have the desperation to consider what others would not. I will cover the debt, ensure the shop remains yours, and guarantee financial stability. All I ask is that you stand beside me for the next year as my wife." The call ended before she could protest. The rain seemed to grow heavier, echoing her heartbeat. She turned toward home, her shoes soaked through, her mind racing. That night, sitting at the small kitchen table with her younger brother Daniel, Ella explained what had been asked of her. Daniel looked at her with wide eyes. "You cannot seriously be thinking about this," he said. "Marry a stranger for money? That is insane." Ella ran her fingers along the cracked edge of the table, the one her mother used to decorate with flower petals every spring. "It is not about money," she said softly. "It is about keeping what little we have left. If I do nothing, we lose the shop, we lose everything. At least this way I can save it." "You do not even know him," Daniel argued. "What if he is dangerous? What if he—" "I do not have time to wonder," Ella cut in, her voice trembling but resolute. "The bank is already waiting. This is the only chance we have." 3 days later, Ella walked into Brooks Bistro, the upscale cafe where Adrian had asked to meet. Warm light spilled across polished floors, the air scented with fresh coffee and roasted garlic. She felt entirely out of place in her thrift store dress, her shoes damp from the rain. At a corner table, Adrian Miles sat in a tailored suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his presence commanding without effort. But there was something else about him, something shadowed in his eyes. He rose when she approached. "Miss Carter," he greeted, gesturing for her to sit. His tone was formal, almost rehearsed. "Why me?" she asked again as she sat down, clutching her bag tightly. "Why not someone from your own world?" Adrian studied her for a moment before answering. "Because I need someone real. Someone with no ties to my family, no hidden agenda. I do not need love, Miss Carter. I need a companion in name, a partner to silence the courts and protect my son. In return, I will give you freedom from your debt." "Oh?" Ella stared down at the linen tablecloth, the weight of the decision pressing into her chest. Every instinct told her this was madness, but every memory of her mother's flower shop, the smell of roses in spring, and the sight of her brother's tired face told her she had no choice. She lifted her chin, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "I will do it." Adrian inclined his head, his expression unreadable. "Good. The arrangements will be made immediately." Dawn. As Ella left the cafe, rain once again pouring from the sky. She wondered if she had just saved her family or sold her soul. The night closed in around her, and the words echoed in her mind like a vow she could never take back. Ella woke the next morning with the weight of her decision pressing against her chest. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets damp and shining under the early sun, but inside her small apartment the air felt heavier than ever. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, staring at her with the same disbelief he had carried since she told him about Adrian's proposal. "You really said yes," Daniel muttered, his voice tight. "You are going to marry a man you barely know. Ella, this is not just about money. You are tying yourself to his life, his rules, his problems. What if this destroys you?" Ella poured water into 2 mismatched mugs, her hands trembling slightly. "It is not about me, Daniel. It is about saving the shop, about keeping a roof over our heads. If I walk away, the bank takes everything. If I agree, at least we still have something. At least we still have a future." Daniel leaned forward, frustration in his eyes. "But what about your future, Ella? What about your dreams? You always wanted to take Mom's flower shop and turn it into a studio. You talked about teaching children, about painting again. How does marrying a stranger give you that?" For a moment Ella could not answer. She thought of her sketchbook hidden beneath her bed, its pages filled with half-finished drawings she no longer had time to complete. The memory stung, but she forced herself to stand tall. Dreams do not matter if we have nothing to live on. This is the only way. That afternoon, a car pulled up outside their building. Sleek, black, and far too expensive for the neighborhood, it drew stares from every window. Adrian's driver stepped out, opening the door with a practiced motion. Ella hugged Daniel tightly, whispering, "I will be all right. Take care of the shop while I am gone." Daniel gripped her hand. "If he hurts you, Ella, I will come for you. I swear it." She managed a faint smile before sliding into the car. Inside, Adrian sat waiting, his expression unreadable as ever. He gave a short nod. "Miss Carter, we have an appointment with my attorney. The contract must be signed today." The ride was silent except for the hum of the engine. Ella stared out the tinted windows as the city slipped past, her stomach twisting tighter with every mile. The attorney's office was in a gleaming glass building downtown. The marble lobby and polished brass fixtures reminded her of another world, one she did not belong to. In the conference room, Adrian's lawyer laid out a set of papers as thick as a textbook. "These are the terms," the man said, adjusting his glasses. "A legal marriage binding for 1 year. Confidentiality is absolute. In exchange, all debts associated with the Carter Flower Shop will be paid in full. In addition, a monthly allowance will be provided to Miss Carter for personal expenses." Ella's eyes skimmed the pages. Rules and clauses stretched across the lines, cold and clinical. No romantic expectations. Attend all scheduled public events. No interference in business decisions. No disclosure of the arrangement. Custody of Adrian's son remains solely his. Her throat tightened as she reached the final clause. Failure to uphold the contract meant immediate annulment and loss of all financial support. Adrian studied her carefully. "You do not have to agree," he said evenly. "But if you walk away, the bank will take the shop tomorrow. This is your choice." Ella picked up the pen, her fingers shaking. For a moment she thought of her mother, of the scent of fresh roses in the spring, of Daniel's tired smile when he came home from school. Her chest ached, but she signed. The lawyer collected the documents with mechanical efficiency. "Congratulations, Mr. Miles, Miss Carter. You are now legally bound as husband and wife." The words hit Ella like a stone sinking into water. She was married. Not in love, not with joy, but with ink on paper and a deal sealed by desperation. That evening, Adrian drove her to his estate. The wrought iron gates creaked open as the car rolled up the long driveway. The mansion loomed like something from a painting, its towering columns stark against the twilight sky. To Ella, it did not feel like a home. It felt like a fortress. Inside, the marble foyer gleamed under crystal chandeliers. A housekeeper took her bag silently. Adrian gestured toward the grand staircase. "Your room is prepared upstairs. Dinner will be served at 7. I will expect you there." Ella climbed the stairs slowly, her heart pounding. The room she entered was lavish silk curtains, a king-sized bed, antique furnishings. But it felt cold, untouched, as if no one had ever truly lived there. She set her bag on the dresser and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the gold trim on the walls. For the first time, she realized the depth of what she had done. She was no longer simply Ella Carter, the struggling student. She was Ella Miles, the wife of a man she barely knew, bound by a contract that demanded she give up her freedom for a year. Her chest tightened. She whispered to herself, "What have I done?" Downstairs, the faint echo of Adrian's voice carried through the marble halls as he spoke to the staff. His words were calm, precise, but Ella could not shake the feeling that he was hiding something more, something she had yet to discover. The mansion, the contract, the weight of a name, not her own, everything pressed against her like chains. And though the deal was struck, Ella could not silence the small voice inside that whispered of danger and of truths still buried in shadows. Dinner that evening was served in a dining hall, so large it felt more like a museum than a home. A long mahogany table stretched beneath a glittering chandelier, polished until it reflected the soft light. Adrian sat at the far end, his posture straight, his expression carved in stone. Ella sat opposite him, the distance between them filled with silence and the clink of silverware. A chef she never saw brought out plates of roasted duck, garlic potatoes, and vegetables arranged with surgical precision. Ella picked at the food, her appetite gone. Her gaze kept drifting to Adrian, who ate in measured bites, his face unreadable. "You will need training," Adrian said finally, his voice low but carrying across the table. "There are 5 events scheduled over the next 3 months. A charity gala, a shareholders' dinner, 2 family gatherings, and a press conference. At each one, you will be at my side. You will be expected to act the part of a wife." Ella swallowed hard. "And what does that mean?" "It means you will speak with grace. You will walk with confidence. You will wear what is provided for you, and you will not draw unnecessary attention," Adrian answered, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I will have a stylist here tomorrow. She will handle your wardrobe. My assistant will provide etiquette guidance. There will be no mistakes." Ella felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I am not a doll you can dress and parade around." Adrian's fork paused halfway to his mouth. For a moment his gaze softened, but the mask returned quickly. "You agreed to the terms, Miss Carter. If you cannot handle the role, the contract ends, and so does your family's security." The words stung, sharp and cold. Ella dropped her eyes to the plate, her fists clenched in her lap. The next morning, as promised, a stylist arrived with racks of gowns and boxes of shoes. The bedroom, that had felt so lifeless, now looked like the back room of a fashion house. Ella stood stiffly as measurements were taken, fabrics pressed against her skin, and jewelry boxes snapped open. "You have the frame for elegance," the stylist murmured, adjusting a sapphire necklace against Ella's collarbone. "But you will need posture and poise. Do not slouch, shoulders back, chin high." By the afternoon, an etiquette coach had joined, pacing the floor with a sharp tone. "You must never interrupt when a shareholder speaks. When dining, the salad fork is always the smaller one. When in doubt, smile, but do not giggle. A wife of Mr. Miles does not giggle." Ella's head spun. The lessons came so fast she barely had time to breathe. Every mistake was noted, every slip corrected. By evening she collapsed onto the bed, exhausted. Later, she overheard voices drifting from the study downstairs. Adrian and his lawyer. "The girl is raw," the lawyer said. "She will stand out for the wrong reasons. Are you certain about this arrangement?" Adrian's reply came after a long silence. "I do not need perfection. I need authenticity. The courts will see a wife, the shareholders will see stability, and my son will not be taken from me. That is all that matters." Ella pressed her hand to the doorframe, her chest tight. For the first time, she understood why Adrian had chosen her. Not because she was special, but because she was convenient. A solution. A shield. That night, she sat at the vanity, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The sapphire necklace gleamed at her throat, but the girl staring back at her looked like a stranger. She touched the glass, whispering to herself, "I will not break. I cannot break." Down the hall, Adrian stood outside his son's room, listening to the boy breathe softly in his sleep. His eyes flickered with something Ella had not seen yet, a trace of weariness, of fear. He closed the door quietly and walked back into the silence of the mansion. The contract had been signed, the rules had been written, but deep beneath the marble and chandeliers, something else was already stirring: doubt, defiance, and the first sparks of a storm neither of them could control. The first of the promised events came sooner than Ella expected. Only a week after she had moved into Adrian's mansion, the invitation arrived in an envelope heavy with gold trim. A charity gala hosted at the Grand Orion Hotel, with Adrian Miles listed as one of the sponsors. Ella stood before the mirror as the stylist adjusted the straps of her gown. The dress shimmered like liquid silver under the lights, but Ella's stomach twisted. Her hands shook when she tried to fasten the clasp of the necklace, and the stylist had to step in. "Do not fidget," the woman scolded softly. "You will be photographed from every angle. Hold your chin high." Oh, quote. Adrian appeared in the doorway a moment later, dressed in a black tuxedo tailored so perfectly it seemed part of him. His eyes scanned Ella quickly, and for the first time there was a flicker of something other than cold calculation. "You look suitable," he said. His words were clipped, but Ella caught the brief hesitation behind them. The gala hall glowed with crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors. Guests in gowns and suits sparkled with diamonds, their laughter rising above the soft music of a string quartet. Ella's heart pounded as she stepped onto the carpet at Adrian's side. Cameras flashed. The whispers began immediately. "Who is she?" one voice murmured. "New wife, I heard. Looks out of place," another replied. Adrian's hand rested lightly at her back, steady but formal. "Remember," he whispered, "smile when necessary. Speak only when addressed. Follow my lead." They made their way through the crowd, stopping at clusters of shareholders and politicians. Adrian introduced her with precision. "This is my wife, Ella Miles." Each time, Ella forced a polite smile, her throat dry. She wanted to disappear, but the eyes of the wealthy followed her everywhere. At the banquet table, a journalist leaned forward with a sly smile. "Mrs. Miles, tell us, how did you and your husband meet? It must be quite a story." "Oh." Ella froze, the practiced lines she had rehearsed slipping away. She could feel every gaze turned toward her, waiting. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, testing her. Ella took a slow breath. "Sometimes life brings two people together not through grand design, but through necessity," she said carefully. "We met when our paths crossed at the right moment. I am grateful for it." The journalist raised an eyebrow, clearly fishing for scandal, but the crowd around the table nodded politely. Adrian gave the smallest nod, the faintest sign of approval. Later, as dessert was served, a crisis erupted at the far end of the room. A donor accused a waiter of spilling wine on her dress, her voice rising loud enough for the entire hall to hear. Guests turned, murmurs spreading. The waiter, young and pale, stammered apologies. Before Adrian could stand, Ella moved. She walked across the floor, her silver gown trailing behind her. "Please," she said gently to the donor. "Accidents happen. I am sure he did not mean it. Let me help you." She picked up a cloth from the table and began dabbing at the stain, her calm tone softening the woman's outrage. "It is only fabric, but his dignity matters more. We can fix a dress. Let us not ruin an evening." The donor blinked, her anger cooling under Ella's steady gaze. With a reluctant sigh, she waved the waiter away. The tension in the hall melted back into chatter. When Ella returned to the table, Adrian's eyes followed her closely. He did not speak, but when his hand brushed against hers under the table, it lingered just a moment longer than necessary. Back at the mansion later that night, Adrian poured himself a glass of whiskey in the study. Ella stood at the doorway, uncertain. He looked at her for a long moment before saying quietly, "You surprised me tonight. I expected you to falter." "Oh," Ella lifted her chin. "I am not here to embarrass you. Whatever this arrangement is, I will not fail." For a heartbeat, something unguarded crossed Adrian's face. a flicker of respect, maybe even admiration. But just as quickly, the walls returned. Get some rest, Ella. This was only the beginning. She walked back to her room, her heart unsteady. For the first time since she signed the contract, she wondered if there was more to Adrian Miles than the cold man who had trapped her in this marriage. But she also knew one thing, with certainty: the storm between them was only beginning. The days that followed the gala passed in a blur of lessons, fittings, and appearances. Yet something between Ella and Adrian had shifted. He was still guarded, still wrapped in his armor of control. But there were moments when she caught glimpses of a man hidden beneath the surface. One night, after another long day of preparation for the upcoming shareholders' dinner, Ella wandered through the halls of the mansion. She found herself outside a door half open, soft light spilling from within. She hesitated, then stepped inside. It was Adrian's son's room. Toys were neatly arranged on the shelves, books stacked by the bed, a soft nightlight glowing in the corner. Adrian sat at the bedside, watching the boy breathe in sleep. His shoulders, always so rigid in public, now seemed heavy with quiet exhaustion. Ella froze at the doorway, unsure if she should leave. But Adrian's voice broke the silence, low and raw. He is all I have left. The court would take him from me if they believed I could not give him stability. That is why this arrangement exists. Not for money, not for appearances. For him. Ella stepped forward slowly. You could have chosen anyone. Someone polished. Someone who belonged in your world. Why me? Adrian turned, his eyes shadowed. Because you do not belong in their world. And that means you are real. You are not after power or position. You want nothing from me except to save your family. That is why I trusted you. The words stunned her. She had never thought of herself as trustworthy to a man like him. For a moment, the distance between them seemed to shrink. Adrian looked back at his son, his voice dropping even softer. I am terrified every day. If I lose him, I lose everything. I cannot let that happen. Ella's chest ached. She knew what it meant to cling to the last piece of family, to fight against losing it. Slowly, she rested her hand on the back of the chair beside him. Then we will not let it happen, she said firmly. We will face it together. For the first time since their marriage, Adrian's eyes softened. The mask slipped, just a fraction, revealing the loneliness behind his power. Later that night, Ella returned to her room, but she could not sleep. She sat at the vanity, sketchbook open on her lap, her pencil tracing lines almost without thought. She drew a man and his son beneath a tree, the boy laughing, the father finally smiling. The drawing made her heart tighten with something she did not want to name. The following evening, as she prepared for bed, she heard footsteps pause outside her door. A long silence, then the sound of Adrian walking away. Ella touched the sketchbook again, whispering into the quiet, "He is not what I thought he was." For the first time, the walls of the mansion did not feel entirely like a prison. There was warmth flickering in the distance, fragile but real, waiting to be found. The storm came without warning. For weeks, Ella had been adjusting to the rhythm of her new life public appearances with Adrian. Etiquette lessons that tested her patience, and rare, fleeting moments when his guard slipped enough for her to glimpse the man beneath. But one evening, during a lavish family gathering at the Miles estate, everything unraveled. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and polished marble, filled with relatives, shareholders, and society figures eager to whisper behind crystal glasses. Ella stood at Adrian's side, her silver gown catching the light, her smile carefully practiced. She thought she was holding her own until a sharp, familiar voice sliced through the chatter. It was Cassandra Miles, Adrian's cousin, known for her ruthless ambition. She approached with a smirk, her eyes fixed on Ella like a hawk. "So this is the wife," Cassandra said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "How curious that no one had ever heard of you before. Tell me, Ella, was it love at first sight, or simply a convenient arrangement?" The air thickened, murmurs spread among the crowd. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, waiting to see how Ella would respond. Ella's throat went dry. She forced her chin up, but Cassandra's words struck like daggers. Cassandra pressed on, her voice dripping with poison. "We all know the truth, Adrian. You brought her here to fool the courts. A contract bride. How pathetic. And you think this charade will help you keep custody of your son? The board will tear you apart once they hear." Gasps echoed around them. Ella felt the world tilt. A contract. She had lived every moment under the shadow of secrecy, and now it was dangling in the open. Faces turned toward her, eyes filled with suspicion and judgment. Adrian stepped forward at last, his voice low and controlled. "Enough, Cassandra." But Cassandra only smiled wider. "What will you do, Adrian? Admit it in front of everyone? Or let your little wife speak for herself?" Ella's hands trembled as she clutched her clutch bag. For a second she thought of Daniel, of the flower shop, of every sacrifice that had brought her here. The walls closed in. She wanted to run, but her feet refused to move. Then, like a blow to the chest, the real truth slammed into her. Adrian had not only arranged this marriage to protect his son, he had also been hiding something greater. She remembered the hushed tones between Adrian and his lawyer, the unexplained wealth he disguised behind a modest front. The Miles fortune was far larger than anyone knew, hidden in trusts and accounts shielded from public eyes. Adrian was not just wealthy, he was one of the city's most powerful men, deliberately concealing his empire. The realization burned. He had told her he wanted honesty, but he had given her none. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "You lied to me." Adrian turned, his eyes dark with something unspoken. "Ella, it is not what you think." But the damage was done. Tears stung her eyes as she pulled away from him, the laughter and whispers of the crowd rising around her like a storm. She fled through the hall, the marble floor cold beneath her heels, the chandeliers spinning above her like cruel stars. Outside, the night air hit her like ice. She gasped, her breath clouding as if she had been underwater too long. For the first time since signing the contract, Ella no longer felt trapped in a deal. She felt betrayed by the only man she had begun to trust. Behind her, Adrian remained in the ballroom, his fists clenched, his empire on the edge of collapse. For Ella, everything she thought she knew about him had shattered in a single moment, leaving only the echo of her own breaking heart. Ella did not stop running until the lights of the ballroom faded behind her. She stumbled down the stone steps of the Miles estate, her gown dragging against the wet ground, her chest tight with humiliation and fury. The cold night air stung her cheeks, but nothing compared to the sting of betrayal. Adrian had stood silent while his cousin tore her apart in front of everyone. Worse, she now knew he had been hiding the true depth of his wealth from her. Back in her room, she shut the door and collapsed against it, tears spilling freely. The mansion, once suffocating, now felt like a prison closing in. She pulled the necklace from her throat and hurled it onto the vanity. "You lied to me," she whispered to the empty air. "You made me believe we were in this together, but I was just another piece in your game." For the next 2 days, she avoided Adrian entirely. Meals were sent to her room, lessons canceled. She sat by the window with her sketchbook, but her pencil refused to move. Every time she thought of Adrian's eyes, that moment in the ballroom, her chest ached with both anger and something she hated to admit hurt. Meanwhile, Adrian faced his own storm. Shareholders demanded explanations. Lawyers pressed him for damage control. His cousin Cassandra fed rumors to the press, painting Ella as a fraud and their marriage as nothing but a sham. Late one evening, Adrian knocked on Ella's door. She did not answer, but he entered anyway, his face drawn from exhaustion. "Ella," he said quietly, "you have to believe me. Cassandra is twisting everything. She wants my son, my company, everything I have built. The truth about my fortune was never about deceiving you, it was about protecting him. If the courts saw the full extent of my assets, they would use it as leverage to strip him from me." Ella turned her face away, her voice sharp. "You expect me to believe that after standing there while she humiliated me? You could have spoken up. You could have defended me." Adrian's voice broke, softer than she had ever heard it. "I froze. I thought I could control it. I was wrong." He stepped closer, his eyes filled with something raw. "I did not choose you because you were convenient. I chose you because you are the only one I could trust with my son's future. I know I have failed you, but please do not walk away." Ella's eyes blurred with tears, her chest aching with conflict. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to cling to the moments when she had seen the man behind the mask. But trust once broken was not easily rebuilt. "I cannot be your shield anymore, Adrian," she whispered. "Not if it means losing myself." Her words left the room heavy with silence. Adrian's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. He left quietly, the door clicking shut behind him. That night, Ella packed a small bag. She left the sapphire necklace on the dresser, the contract folded on the table. Slipping out before dawn, she walked down the long driveway alone, her heart shattered. Inside the mansion, Adrian stood at his son's bedside, watching the boy sleep. The house felt emptier than ever. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel the weight of loneliness. His empire was intact, but his heart was crumbling. Both of them were left with silence, distance, and the echo of words unsaid, proof that sometimes the deepest wounds were not carved by enemies, but by the ones we had dared to trust. The following week was chaos. Cassandra's whispers had reached the boardroom, and the media was alive with speculation. Headlines accused Adrian of staging a fraudulent marriage to protect his fortune and his son. Shareholders questioned his leadership. Lawyers prepared motions to strip him of control. Adrian sat in his study, the curtains drawn, files scattered across the desk. His son played quietly in the corner, unaware of the storm building outside. For the first time in years, Adrian felt the walls of his empire closing in. And this time, Ella was not by his side. But Ella had not vanished. She returned to the flower shop, determined to rebuild her life. The shelves were nearly empty, the air heavy with dust, yet she threw herself into work with trembling hands. Each morning she swept the floors, arranged what little stock she had, and sketched designs for the shop she still dreamed of creating. She tried to convince herself she was free, but at night her thoughts always drifted back to Adrian, the man who had hurt her, yet somehow also awakened something she had never felt before. Then, one evening, her phone buzzed. A notification flashed across the screen. Adrian Miles to hold emergency press conference. Her breath caught. She almost ignored it, but something in her heart pushed her to turn on the live broadcast. Adrian stood behind a podium, cameras flashing, his jaw set with determination. "The rumors you have heard are true," he said, his voice steady. "My marriage to Ella began as an arrangement, but what no one will tell you is why. I did it to protect my son, the only family I have left. I thought a contract would shield him. What I did not realize was that along the way, I found something real. I found a woman whose courage, honesty, and kindness revealed everything I had forgotten about trust. I do not regret marrying her. I regret failing her." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The shareholders shifted uncomfortably. Reporters leaned forward, scribbling notes. Adrian raised his chin. "If this costs me my company, so be it. But I will not stand here and let anyone call her a fraud. Ella Carter is my wife, and she deserves respect." Ella's eyes filled with tears as the broadcast ended. For the first time, Adrian had chosen truth over power. He had risked everything not for appearances, but for her. Her hands trembled as she closed the phone. The choice was now hers. Would she let fear and betrayal hold her back? Or would she step forward and meet him halfway? The answer was already blooming in her chest like a fragile flower reaching for light. The next morning, Ella stood outside the Miles headquarters, her heart pounding as cameras and reporters swarmed the entrance. She had not planned to come, but Adrian's words from the press conference echoed inside her. For the first time, he had chosen honesty. For the first time, he had risked everything, not for business, but for her. When she walked into the boardroom, the crowd fell silent. Adrian was standing at the head of the table, his eyes weary but resolute. He turned, stunned to see her there. "Ella," he whispered, almost as if he did not believe she was real. She stepped forward, her voice steady though her hands shook. "If you are going to fight for the truth, Adrian, then I will fight with you. But this time, no secrets, no contracts, only honesty." The board members shifted in their seats, murmurs rising. Cassandra glared from across the room, her smirk faltering. For the first time, Adrian's empire no longer seemed like his alone, it felt shared, grounded by the woman who now stood beside him. Later that evening, after the dust of the meeting had settled, Adrian led Ella into a quiet gallery. The walls were lined with paintings. She recognized immediately her own sketches, enlarged and framed, each one brought to life. Her breath caught as she turned to him. You did this?" Adrian nodded, his voice soft. "I wanted to show you that you are more than a contract, Ella. You are more than a name on paper. You have given me strength when I was too proud to admit I needed it. This is my way of proving I see you. All of you. Tears blurred her vision as she moved closer. "Why would you do this, after everything?" "Because I love you," Adrian said simply. "And I will spend the rest of my life proving it, if you let me." In his hand, he held a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold ring, nothing like the glittering jewels he could easily afford. "The first ring was a symbol of a contract," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "This one is a promise, no lies, no conditions, only us." Ella's breath trembled. For a moment, the memory of betrayal fought against the hope blooming in her chest. Then she slipped the ring onto her finger, her tears falling freely. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Adrian. But this time, it is real." The following week, the gallery became the setting for their wedding. No shareholders, no family politics, only a small circle of trusted friends. Adrian's son stood proudly between them, tossing petals into the air, as Ella and Adrian exchanged vows. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Adrian pulled Ella close, his voice breaking as he whispered against her hair. "Not a contract, not a lie, our forever." The crowd cheered softly, but for Ella and Adrian, the noise faded into nothing. In that moment, there was no boardroom, no betrayal, no past. Only love, fragile and fierce, blooming like the flowers Ella had once feared she would lose. And for the first time, both of them felt free.